Good morning, welcome to Life Connect. I started playing the guitar when I was around 13 years old, and it's been one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing over the last 46 years. It of course can be fun, and in my mind I've never mastered it as a skill. Nowadays these electronic tuners, based on the vibrations that the strings give out, its tone, its wavelength, they're really useful. When my guitar is out of tune, of course, I have to tune it to something that is proper, or the set or the standard pattern for that note. And I tune it back to that. It reminds me of a story that I heard of an Italian guitarist, but I guess he's better known for playing the violin. His name was Paganini. Once he was before an audience and he was playing his great work, Napoleon. And as he played, one of the strings broke, but he continued to play on. And then another one broke, but Paganini plays on. And then a third string broke, and he had one left, and he looked out on his shocked but sold out audience in Italy, and he lifted up his violin and yelled, "Paganini!" and one string, and then proceeded to wow them with the entire piece played on just one string. He received a standing ovation when he was done. Now that's a nice story, whether it's legend or not, or there is some truth to it, I don't really know, but it's a great story. We've been watching as Paul writes to a church that he's planted a few months before. He'd received news of how they were doing, and despite struggles and pressure and opposition and persecution and things that they still needed to learn, they were shining for Jesus. And as we've seen, he remarks on three things in their lives: faith, love and hope. Yesterday we thought of work produced by faith. Today is love, and that labour that is prompted in their lives by love. Paul is writing, or helping I should say, this church wrestle with the pressures of the world around them. To be different to those around them, and to live lives that are worthy of God who's redeemed and saved them. I often hear people say, and maybe I've said it myself, that things are tough today, that morals have gone to pot and so on. And in some senses there's truth there. And yet, at the time Paul is writing into the lives of these young men and young women, they've been saved from a pagan background where sexual license was the order of the day. We thought of this a couple of days ago, where seducing your friend's wife or sleeping with any woman you wanted. In Greek, there's a word eros, from which we get the word eroticism. And according to Pollack, who wrote his book called The Apostle on the Life of Paul, he says that eroticism was in the very air that these people lived and breathed. In chapter 4, Paul writes these words to them. He says, "It's God's will that you should be holy. You should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honourable, not in passionate lust like the pagans who do not know God." Paul is writing to these believers to remind them that when he was with them, he used and introduced a new word, agape, which Christians had coined to replace the debased word eros. And agape, that other word for love, is a love that's purified and a love that transforms. Agape love is a sacrificial love. It's the love that caused God to send his son. For God so loved the world, he sent his one and only son. It's the love that took Christ to the cross to die for his enemies, for sinners. Now we know that God demonstrates his love for us. And it's the love that God's Spirit is birthing in their lives, a love for God and a love for others. According to Paul, a few years later, he'll write to a church in Corinth and he'll say, faith, hope and love. And the greatest of these is love. Love that is pure, not self-seeking in any way. Love that is the one string that we're called to live life on. If you like, a symphony on one string. And of course you see this, how this dovetails into what Jesus has to say. When Jesus is asked about the greatest commandment, he says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. And the second is equally important, he says, love your neighbour as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. Jesus a little later says this, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And a new commandment I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. John Stott once called a love the badge of the Christian faith. Folks, when they looked at the early church, they saw that they loved each other, they cared, they supported, they built up, they nurtured, they were there for each other. There was a chorus I learned as a child, went like this: J-O-Y, J-O-Y, surely this must mean. And then the J stood for Jesus first. The Y at the end was yourself last, others in between. The O in the middle was others. And this was the church that was doing it. Labour has been prompted by love. Whatever you do, may it come from love. May it be to love. May it point to love. It's time to fine-tune that love string again. Paul loves benedictions. And in chapter 3, he ends it with that's beautifully constructed prayer. That's what a benediction is. And he says this: May God our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ bring us to you very soon. May the Lord make you love for one another and for all people grow and overflow, just as our love for you overflows. May he as a result make your heart strong and blameless and holy as you stand before God our Father when our Lord Jesus comes again with all his holy people. May we know that love as we fine-tune that love in our lives today. Every blessing.